Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. That is a great song. The 9 o'clock service, they forgot they're supposed to be quiet this morning, so it was really kind of great. A nun gets into a cab. Oh, do you know this joke? And after driving a bit, she notices that the driver is glancing back at her in the rearview mirror, and he looks nervous. "What's the matter, my son?" she asked. "Well, sister, I feel very uncomfortable telling you this, but I've always had a romantic fantasy about kissing a nun." It's the Catholics that are laughing the loudest. I want you to know that. So. "Oh my," she says. "Well, a kiss isn't too bad. Maybe we can kiss if you are both a Catholic and single." And he hesitates and he says, "Why, yes, I am." He pulls over and they share a passionate kiss. He arrives at the destination, and as she's getting out, she says, "You still seem very uncomfortable, my son." And he says, "Sister, I feel so guilty. I lied. I'm not a Catholic, and worse, I'm not single. I'm a married man." "Oh," she says, "well, maybe I can make you feel better. You see, I'm not really a nun. I'm going to a costume party, and my name is Kevin." I have performed the ultimate ministry joke trifecta. It's religious, it's a drag queen joke, and it actually does pertain to my topic today. So that's a tough one to pull off. I'm pretty proud of myself. Today I'm talking about the end of the comfort zone. Are you uncomfortable? How that relates to the topic is that many of us live safe, comfortable lives, but we're not being true to who we are. We're hiding behind a disguise. Many of us pretend to be small, insignificant people, and we don't want to do anything to make waves, and so we hide out in our comfort zone. And today, we're going to be talking about how to get uncomfortable for God. Are you ready? Some of you are just really uncomfortable with this topic. I get it. So that means I'm doing my job already. There's a wonderful quote that this is taken from by Neil Donald Walsh, who is a religious science minister and author. He wrote that great book, Conversation with God, and he says this: "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone." And there's something deeply true in this, that if we are to really experience and express the life God has created for us and within us and as us and for us, we have to grow. We have to heal. We have to let all those lesser identities go so we can step into our destiny. And I was thinking about what Bible story or great old myth or what is one of the great stories that I could tell to illustrate this. And I was reminded of several, but then there's actually a teaching from Hindu scripture that I want to offer today. I got this from Stephen Cope wrote a book called The Great Work of Your Life, and it's based upon the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the epic poems in Hindu scripture. And it's a beautiful story that talks about what keeps us from our destiny and what calls us into what we're here to be and what we're here to experience. So in the story, Prince Arjuna is of the warrior caste, and his destiny is to fight on behalf of his people. And he, with his faithful chariot driver, Krishna, they come to the battlefield, and he asks him to drive him to the very middle of the battlefield, and then he sees the opposing armies there, and he has a horrifying discovery. The opposing army is filled with his own kinsmen. It's his own cousins and uncles. And he is being asked as a warrior to fight against his own family. And this sets up a horrible dilemma. And this is the setting for this conversation we're going to have today about our destiny, about stepping into what we are called to do, even though it might make us uncomfortable. In this book, The Great Work of Your Life, Stephen Cope says this: "Our fantasies about fulfillment often center around dreams of wealth, power, fame, and leisure. In these fantasies, a fulfilling life is one in which we acquire so much freedom and leisure that we no longer have to work and strive. We can relax by our own personally monogrammed swimming pool, with the gates of our country club community firmly locked behind us, and there at last find true happiness and real fulfillment, perhaps contemplating the perfectly blue sky." But the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita point to a much more interesting truth. People actually feel happiest and most fulfilled when meeting the challenge of bringing their Dharma to the world, when bringing highly concentrated effort to some compelling activity for which they have a true calling. If we are to become fully who we're created to be, we have to move past our safe and comfortable little lives. We are going to be confronted with something that will call us to question who we are and why am I here. This word dharma may be unfamiliar to some of you. Sounds like karma. It's a rhyme. It's not the same thing. Karma is that law of cause and effect that we, in the traditions of Hinduism and Hinduism, we would carry karma forward. Things that we did in one lifetime, if we don't atone here, we carry it forward into future lifetimes. Dharma is different. There are many definitions of the word dharma, but the one I'm going to really focus on today is sacred duty or purpose, sacred purpose or path. That each of us is given a particular calling in life. We are called forward into life. That is our dharma. We are here to bring it. I want to tell you about this strange story of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna finds himself seeing his own people there and on both sides, and he says, I don't want to do this. And his chariot driver, Krishna, reveals himself not to be a lowly chariot driver, but actually a god, Lord Krishna, who is incarnation. Yeah, that's not actually the word I was looking for, but that'll work. An incarnation of Lord Vishnu, which is one of the great three gods in Hinduism. Vishnu is the sustainer god, and Krishna reveals himself to be divine and says, you must do this thing. It is your destiny. It is your dharma. Now, before we get too hung up on the battlefield aspect of this, I want to say that this is a great story of great teaching and great symbology. We're not actually telling you that God wants you to go kill people. What we're saying, your cousins, I know some of you probably have a list. No, I'm just kidding. No. But what we're saying is this: the battlefield is symbolic of our own struggle to be the person that we're called to be, our ethical struggles, our moral struggles, our struggles with our lesser identities. That's what we're talking about. And Arjuna finds himself just stuck. As a matter of fact, it says that he's just laying in the bottom of the chariot, paralyzed with fear. Have you ever been in the bottom of your chariot, paralyzed with fear? Yeah. This is a deep teaching we're offering today. This idea that sometimes the spiritual path will ask us to do things that make us feel uncomfortable. We often teach in Unity that we should follow our bliss. There's actually a book that we sometimes have here called Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. That sounds much better. Maybe I should just teach on that instead of this idea of moving past your comfort zone. These are true, but often the path fulfilling our destiny will call us forward, and it will also call forward all of our false beliefs and limitations and fears. When we declare for ourselves a bright and brilliant experience of living the abundant life that Jesus taught us about, everything that is unlike that brilliant and bright life will be right in your face. Does that make sense? Some of you have experienced this, right? The old metaphysicians called it chemicalization. That there is an idea that if I'm going to really step boldly into who I know I am and what God has called and prepared for me, then everything that doesn't believe that's true will show itself. This is the battlefield upon which we find ourselves. I remember the first time I heard this teaching in a New Thought church. It was probably about 17, 18 years ago. I was living in Dallas. I was still doing my piano bar thing, but I was also a music director at a New Thought church. And I had gotten an opportunity to write a musical with two very talented script writers, and I wrote the songs for this musical, and we had done part of it for a festival, and it got picked up by an Equity Theater in Dallas. I was very excited. I've had this lifelong dream of writing musicals. And so it's happening. We have the theater, we have the actors cast, we're in rehearsals, and I am terrified. I think, who am I to be writing songs that people are going to buy tickets to come see? It's probably not any good. This is totally outside my comfort zone. I felt exposed and vulnerable. I felt like a fraud. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was at church one Sunday, and our minister there, Reverend Dr. Petra Weldis, she gave this talk I'm giving you today about expanding beyond our comfort zone. And she talked about this. If we are going to evolve and expand, and if you imagine there's this little circle around us that is comfortable, where we have everything, we know where it is, and we know what we're doing, and it's all good, and we break down those walls, and we expand into a further place. We've never been there before. Guess how we feel? Uncomfortable, awkward, afraid, nervous. And that's exactly how I was feeling. And what she did for me in that moment 18 years ago was she normalized the experience of getting outside my comfort zone. And not only had I been taught that if you're feeling those kind of things, you're probably on the wrong path, or at least that's the way I'd interpreted some of the teaching I'd gotten, was if you're uncomfortable, that's probably not for you. What she was saying was just the opposite. When you fully commit to your path and you move forward, you are going to feel uncomfortable at times. And it changed my experience. Now, I was able to show up, and I did not become a Broadway composer. I got to become your minister instead. I'm very happy about the way my Dharma showed up. But it taught me an important lesson. Sometimes we want to feel good all the time. Amen? And we're not going to if we're on the spiritual path. We will be met with challenges. We will be met with some challenges of our own creation, some that come to us, like a homeboy named Harvey that comes to town. But we are at every turn, we are being asked to expand into a greater and greater experience of who and what we are. As I mentioned, Arjuna, paralyzed with fear, is lying on the floor of his chariot. Krishna reveals himself to be the great divinity. And he points out immediately, there are 18 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, and they go through many, many great deep teachings about Dharma, about destiny, about how we move. But one of the important teachings is on action and inaction. And here is Arjuna paralyzed with fear, and he says, I'm not going to do anything. Rather than do the wrong thing, rather than fight for one side or the other, I'm just going to lie here and do nothing. That will solve it. And Krishna says, no one exists for even an instant without performing action. In other words, doing nothing is doing something. Arjuna's action, our inaction on the floor of the chariot, the center of the intersection, is action motivated by confusion, paralysis, and disorder. And it is full of action and consequences. You get that? If our fear wants to keep us small, we think that we're going to be safe. We're not safe. Choosing to do nothing is choosing. And there are consequences to this action. Then in the text, Krishna says, there is a certain kind of action that leads to freedom and fulfillment. A certain kind of action that is always aligned with our true nature. And this is the action motivated by Dharma. Destiny. Your sacred purpose for living. There is going to be some action required that takes us beyond what is comfortable, that will reveal our truer nature. And that's what we're about today, is how do we take that leap? In the Gospel of Thomas, which is one of the Gnostic Gospels, it did not make it into the canon of what we call the Christian Bible, but the great wisdom in there too from the Gnostics. In the Gospel of Thomas, it says this, if you bring forward that which is within you, then that which is within you will save you. If you do not bring forward that which was within you, that which is within you will destroy you. There is a consequence to action. There is a consequence to inaction. And this idea of moving beyond our comfort zone, stepping into something new, it kind of contradicts the peaceful teaching we have associated with Jesus, right? What do we call Jesus? The Prince of Peace. Well, it reminded me of another passage which I've always been so uncomfortable with. This is in the Gospel of Matthew. I usually just skip it. You ever do that? Yeah, I don't like that part. But it reminded me today that maybe there's some truth here too. We think of Jesus as being the Prince of Peace. This is Matthew 10, starting in 34. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Why are you laughing? A man's enemies will be members of his own household. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. That is some tough teaching. What does that mean? I thought we were supposed to be in peace and harmony with all beings. Well, this is my interpretation of what Jesus was trying to say there. If indeed these words came from Jesus the Christ, there is a time that our desire for peaceful coexistence will be in opposition to our destiny. There comes a time when we have to tell a difficult truth to someone we love, and they do not want to hear it. And you've done this when you have ended the relationship because it was dysfunctional and abusive. When you have told the addicted child they are no longer welcome in your home until they get clean and sober. You've done this. You know that there is a time when to stand in truth, to step into a greater experience of being the light of God on earth, you have to tell something that someone does not want to hear. And it makes us uncomfortable. Some of us more than others. How many other recovering people pleasers do we have in the room? Just a few of us. Okay, we didn't want to raise our hand because it might offend somebody. I'm here just to tell you this. What I believe this passage means is that we cannot fulfill our Dharma by pleasing our family or doing only that which is socially acceptable. God is going to call you out. If you're going to fulfill your destiny, if you're going to step into a greater experience of who you are on earth, somebody ain't going to like it. And it's okay. Oh, well, goodbye. No, I can't leave you there. I was like, that's a terrible way to end that message. I think I have something else to say here. I was thinking about this as because how many of you have experienced what I'm talking about? Most of us have. If we've been on the spiritual path, we have had to break down our comfort zone and step into a greater experience, and it turns out okay, right? It actually turns out better than we thought. I have so many friends who, when they had a spouse who was caught in addiction, they started going to Al-Anon, and they found out that the problem wasn't the drinking husband or the using wife. The problem that they had their own part of the problem, and they began to practice the principles for themselves, and they began to practice some tough love, and somehow they got sober. I mean, we've seen those stories, not always, but sometimes it moved. When in that tradition, it says when one person gets healthy, everybody gets healthier. There's something about us stepping into that discomfort and being the truthful person that we need to be that calls us into a greater experience that benefits all. We get through it. It becomes okay. And I've thought about it as being like sort of an expansion and contraction. John Moore talks about this. There is a time when we have to expand and stretch and extend, and it's uncomfortable, and then we can breathe a little easier sometimes and rest. It's a cycle. And I was thinking about what's an example I can give you of my life, maybe something we'd all relate to, about what it feels like to expand beyond our comfort zone, to step into a greater reality. And I thought of learning to ride a bicycle. Do you remember that? When you were 5 or 6 or 35, however old were you when you learned to ride a bicycle? By the point you learn to, your tricycle was great. 3 wheels, stable, it just stands there, solid. And then you see this bicycle, and you've learned enough of the laws of physics and of gravity to know if you stand that bicycle up and let go, what happens? It falls over. This is different. This makes me uncomfortable. And so people teach you, maybe your dad, your mom, an older sibling, and they say, you've got to pedal. And they say, pedal faster, but you don't want to pedal faster because it's unstable, and you've learned you have to be careful. And to be careful, you go slow. And the slower you go, the more safe it is. And it's just the opposite. It's counterintuitive. And it's the same thing when we are breaking out of our comfort zone and stepping into a new experience of life, of greater fulfillment and freedom. It doesn't feel like it's going to work. And we feel we have to be slow and careful. But there's somebody, the infinite spirit of life itself says, come on, you got this. There are 3 practices I want to leave you today as you are breaking out of your comfort zone, expanding into a new experience of your life. The first is meditation. Breaking down your comfort zone is stressful work. And stress is not good for the body. Meditation is a beautiful thing to apply to stress. No matter what's going on in the outer world, you connect to the deep breath, the peace of God that is always available within you. As I've been asking people, what do we need to see more of in Unity, this comes up again and again. We need teaching, we need practice groups of meditation. I hear you. We're working on it. Meditation. The second is prayer. In prayer and Unity, we don't deal with the outer condition, we deal with the inner truth. It's a powerful practice of claiming what is true, even though we don't see it in the outer world yet. Affirmative prayer. You can get some today, right after service. Our Unity friends will here pray for you. And the third and the final practice that I want to offer you is a way to learn to ride your bicycle, as a way to expand and to move beautifully into your destiny, your Dharma. It is the practice of spiritual community. I watch people that do this comfort zone expansion thing, and they do it well. I know people that do it really well. And it does get easier. The more you do it, the better you get at it. The people I know who do it well, they do not do it alone. Every expansion requires something to be lost. Even if it's just your former way of life, of being small, there's still grief work to do there, acceptance of the change. Those relationships that no longer fit, there is grief work. And if you're doing it by yourself, it is devastating. But if you can have people gathered around you to support you, One of the things we're really working on in this church is finding ways that you can meet small groups of people, that you can meet those groups of people who will know you, know your story. You know, there's a saying in the Talmud, in the Jewish tradition, that says that over every blade of grass there is an angel bent over whispering, grow, grow. That's what I believe we can have in spiritual community. That when we're breaking down our comfort zones, we're expanding in something, we have people with their arms around us, whispering in our ear, grow, grow. God bless you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.